Hello there, this is Benjamin Clementine and listen to iloveradio.com.
Hey, what's up, Toronto? My name is Bosco, and you're listening to iLive Radio.
This is Dwight Drummond from CBC News Toronto, and you're listening to iLive Radio.
Hey, what's going down, man? It's your boy Trix, a.k.a. the Human Jump Off, man. You locked into iLive Radio. They changed the way I listen to radio, man.
Well, y'all listen to iLive Radio. My name is Steve Boyd of Parliament Funkadelic, and we want to thank iLive Radio for keeping the funk alive all over the world, worldwide.
Join me, Uncle Funky, at noon Eastern Standard Time every Saturday for our music show, Give Me the Night, here on iLive Radio, and enjoy a nooner like nope.
Canadian Black Entertainment's mission is to create, celebrate, and promote Black artistry. Join us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our Instagram for our IG Live with CBE, where we interview artists. Follow us on IG and spread the word. We are here for our artists and are creating a space for them to get the recognition they so deserve. Canadian Black Entertainment, IG Live with CBE, every Wednesday beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. See you on the gram.
You're listening to iLive Radio, changing the way you listen to radio. iLive Radio.
The number one hit music station.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on the Patrick Morris Show. I'm your host, Patrick O'Morris, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about financial literacy. We're going to talk about, what are some of the challenges that people face when they are not really financially savvy, and what are some of those challenges. And today my guest is Caroline. I'm going to butcher your last name. We just talked about this, right? So, okay, you say it.
Zimanska.
Did I say it right?
Yeah, that was perfect.
Okay, good. So you're a financial consultant, advisor, educator. You run workshops. You try to help people to really just get a good understanding of how to manage their finances. So why was this something that you decided to become passionate about, or
That's a really good question. So a long time ago, I worked in actually a very different industry. I worked in the veterinary industry. And I kind of took on this, I guess, nurturing role where we worked in a very different market, obviously not with money, but I liked helping people. And a really, really close friend of mine who is also still a colleague of mine, he's practically like family. His name is Wayne Thompson. He approached me about these educational financial literacy workshops, and just being able to build a firm that was able to focus on educating the community about finance and resources that exist out there. So this was definitely kind of like a passion project. It definitely became a passion project really early on. We started realizing that we can impact a lot of people, and we started a firm, and we've been growing a team ever since then. And we're just really focused on making sure that we give people access to information and to knowledge. So that's basically where we came from. So
you pivoted from working with animals to working with people. Was there a lot of difference?
Very different, right? Yeah, it was quite the transition. I never thought I'd do this, but you know what? I love helping people, and the aspect of education and teaching people how to do a little bit better was always intriguing to me. I love watching people learn and do and improve, and I thought I could do that in any profession. So I ended up here, and I'm really, really happy.
Now, obviously, when people are struggling with, and the environment that we're in right now is really kind of crazy. Shout out to our Ukrainian listeners. Our thoughts and prayers are with you guys as you face this difficult time. And I know with your background, you're a little bit nervous about what's going on in that whole region, but that this whole thing is impacting everything around the world. The price of everything seems to be going up. The price of everything was going up before this. And now, it's hard for people to be able to afford to fill their gas tanks right now.
Exactly.
In the city of Toronto, you want to buy a house, prices have skyrocketed. If you want to try to find some place to rent, the prices have skyrocketed. So the cost of living has gone through the roof, but yet salaries has not kept pace with that. And so, how do you, if I come to you and I'm like, okay, so I want to buy a house, and but my job right now, I'm working 2 jobs, trying to figure this out. How do you help me? Do you open up your bank account and give me some cash?
No, unfortunately. I wish somebody was able to even do that for me. But at the end of the day, what we try to do with a lot of our strategic work here at Trinity. So I work for this, larger organization that essentially helps give people access to different resources. So when a person comes to us and they say, I want to buy, I'm frustrated, I'm still renting, look at all the money that I'm spending in rent. Can I buy? Right? And that answer is not a simple one, right? Maybe when you walk into a bank, right, and you're at a certain condition, the bank will tell you easily, oh yeah, you can buy or you can't buy based on their qualifiers and based on what a bank would be willing to lend you, but for a mortgage. But that doesn't mean that you can't own. That you can't get into real estate necessarily. So what we do is we sit down with an individual or with a family, and we're basically able to identify the exact reasons why that family doesn't own or they're not ready yet. And then what our goal is to be able to help them understand what a strategy is towards ownership. And we help kind of essentially get them through each challenge after the next as quickly as possible to get them to the position where they can own. So it's not an easy answer, right? Because everybody struggles with different things. Some people come to us and they have credit issues. Some people come to us and they have affordability issues. But it's, again, teaching that individual where you're at. Here's the reality. Here's what's going on. Let's identify what's up exactly, and let's bridge those little gaps and show you where you need to go to fix this or to make this better so that you can be ready as quickly as possible. Right. So home ownership can be a bit daunting and scary for people. Aside from the fact that the price of homes is, if you want to try to find something reasonable, you've got to move to, I don't know, Thunder Bay or something. Right. And that's a really hard commute if you work downtown Toronto. Exactly.
But I've had lots of conversations, obviously, with people, and some people are like, you know what, I don't want to take on the responsibility of owning a house, because if I lose my job, then what am I going to do? I'm going to be screwed. But then I look at him like, yeah, but you're paying rent. And you got to live somewhere. So if you lose your job, you still got to figure out how you're going to pay rent anyways. So exactly. But there's at times there seems to be this mental block or this fear that if I own the home, then there's so much more responsibility versus if I'm just renting. And when you do the math, if you're paying, I don't know, $2,000 a month in rent, if you're lucky. And at the end of the year, you're looking at $24,000 that you're never going to get back. Exactly, you're putting in someone else's pocket. So how do you help somebody that's struggling with that fear of buying something is so much? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get it. So I think when it comes to decision making, money is daunting. It's a very daunting topic. It's a very scary topic. We always kind of second guess, our decisions. And when we don't have a lot of money or we don't feel that we're in a good position financially, we're less likely to make risky or what we, individually think are risky decisions. So for one person, buying a home is not a risky decision at all. They're really excited because their mindset is in a different place. But for an individual that says, I'm afraid, it's usually tied to not really understanding what your scenario is and what that would look like. Right? So you're not going to make a decision if you're scared to make a decision because if you think it's too risky. So the best way to flatten that emotion out is let's learn. Okay, learn at what are the benefits, right? What are the downfalls, right? What would happen if you lost a job? What's the worst case scenario, right? And if you did, look what you'd have. You'd still have this house that you have equity in, that you have ownership of, that you can actually use as a leveraging tool. You can use as a backup, right? That doesn't mean that all of a sudden because you miss a mortgage payment, you're going to lose your house, right? So I think what we've learned is we're kind of in this, we have our own kind of level of risk that we feel that we can take on, but it's only because nobody's really sat down with us and said, hey, it's not that hard. It's not that scary. Look what we can do here. If you get a better understanding, if you put your ducks together, here's how we can help you. Does that make sense?
A big part of it is helping them to identify what their risk tolerance is.
Exactly. Yeah, because everybody's got a risk tolerance. I oftentimes have people that come to me and they're like, I don't want to risk money. Nobody has play money. I don't know a single person that has such a thing as play money, right?
Yeah.
It's, when push comes to shove, and right now, like, we're seeing all these different things even happening with our markets at the start of this year. Certain like markets have taken dips, and people are starting to get emotional about their money again, right? As we see whenever changes occur, and all of a sudden now people who would be more risky at one moment think they're less risky at the next because it's a different time in their life, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it all comes down to risk and understanding and knowledge, knowing what you're getting yourself into, I think.
COVID has highlighted a whole lot of things within a lot of holes, gaps, cracks, whatever you want to call them, within our society that we've been living in, as well as, it's identified the inequalities that exist, as well as, the price of everything has gone up. How, with clients that you had before COVID and clients that you now have, what change have you seen in terms of, is there more fear with people these days? Are people feeling more hopeful? Like, what change has you seen?
Good question. I think a lot of individuals kind of, when we face dips and uncertainty, people start to pay a closer attention to their financial situation. So we've seen a lot of people coming to the table that maybe would have never done that before and saying, hey, I need some guidance.
Yeah.
Can you help me? Can you look over our stuff? Can you tell me what you think? What should we be doing? So in a time of fear and uncertainty, I think people have a bigger willingness to listen and to get out of their regular comfort zone or habit. So I've actually found that it was very helpful for a lot of the families that we were working with, because all of a sudden, number one, we're on video. I didn't have to sit across the kitchen table with somebody. People could just call me. We could get on a video call. So I almost feel like that really helped, because now the conversation wasn't as scary. We can just do this digitally. We can talk. Let's have a conversation. And the other aspect was people were just more in tune, like, my income stopped. I don't know if I can depend on CERB.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot saved up. I need to start saving, right? So all of these different triggers, I think these uncertainties have forced people to really openly more look at, I need someone to help me here, right? I can't do this on my own.
If you're just joining me right now, my name is Patrick Morris. This is the Patrick Morris Show, and today we're talking about financial literacy with my guest, Caroline Zeminski, right?
Close enough, Zemanska.
Zemanska. Okay. See, I'm going to get it by the end of this.
All good.
So if people want to, reach out to you or join one of your workshops, your weekly free workshops, how do they do that?
So they can definitely look me up on social media, or even look up our organization name. It's Trinity Solutions Team, or my name, Carolina Zemanska. And we have links always available to be able to book yourself into one of our live webinars. They're always live. We have them 3 days a week. We have them in the evenings. So we really do try to cater to any community, right? And have people come out just to learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do and how we can help people. So that would be the easiest way.
Your workshops are free. Why are they free?
You know what? Because I think money is intimidating enough. And now if all of a sudden you're saying to somebody who can't even really see themselves starting on a financial plan, hey, by the way, you have to pay me to get information, to become better educated. It's kind of daunting, right? I don't think that's right. So we've always had these free webinars because everybody deserves access to education. We should all be learning how to do a little bit better. And it's almost counterproductive when you charge for something that a lot of people, maybe they can't afford, right? So why would we do that? Yeah. Okay.
That's a very good point. Okay. This, money challenges can create problems in relationships. Sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, it's obviously because stress. If you've got two people who are working overtime trying to make things meet and work, or you know, all this sort of stuff, and if there's children in the mix, and you know, kids, there's school trips, they need clothing, they need this, they need that, and you know, there's so many challenges that pop up in relationships because of that. You know, how do you sort of help people to find a little bit of balance in the midst of all of that in their plan?
Good question. So when we work with couples, the end goal really is to help that pair, that couple get together and really create a vision for their future financially. So we find that if a couple doesn't really have a vision or something that they're striving for, it makes it harder to be able to focus their financial health into a place and actually make different financial decisions, even when it comes to their budget or how they're spending money. But all of a sudden, if you can show a couple, hey, you actually hold a lot of power. You know, you're both, for example, if both parties are working, right? No matter what their previous financial decisions were, now we're looking to move forward. How can you guys be stronger together? And really creating that vision for a couple really helps individuals kind of come together and say, okay, we know we have our differences. You know, with couples, usually one person is not the same, you know, maybe doesn't have the same level of discipline when it comes to money that the other person does. But again, if you can paint a bigger picture, right, a lot of couples are more likely to get on that same path and really start making decisions together and be more open, having those conversations. That can be very intimidating, right? So, but you have to, as a couple, be able to have those conversations to be able to move further ahead than if you didn't, right? So that's what we try to really kind of incorporate into any of our services when we're working with a family.
There's a certain, you know, growing up, I was told, or, you know, many of us heard, you know, you don't talk about your finances with other people. You don't talk about money with other people. How much fear do you run into with people, you know, because they have to be fairly open with their bank accounts, right? How much fear do you run into with people that you have to try to help them jump that hurdle?
It's hard. Number one, both parties have to be on board. So I'll tell you, there's so many times that I sit down with individuals and, you know, Mr. or Mrs. are supposed to be on the call and they don't show up, right? So we have this discussion about why do you think they're not here? What's going on, right? So almost not getting into like the psychology of a family unit, but really just saying, okay, so how are we going to handle this? Because both parties really need to be involved. And sometimes that can be very difficult. And not everybody is ready for that at any particularly given time. But just being encouraging, I think, as that other party in that relationship and saying, hey, I just want us to do a little bit better. And, you know, kind of reassuring that other individual that maybe is scared, you know, I'm not trying to throw you under the bus here. We really have to work on something and make it be better, right? And I'm concerned and I care about our future, right? And kind of encouraging that second party to join in on the conversation. It's very important because we see a lot of that, right? Where people just don't show up or they're not really present in the moment when we're sitting in front of them. They're trying to really, because they're worried, right? Like there's so much shame. There's so much guilt. If somebody knows they're not putting their money in the right place or maybe they're overspending, they're just assuming that we're going to come out and we're going to try to point that out and make them feel bad about it, right? Because we're already self-conscious about those decisions. But that's not our role at all, right? It's to get people on the same page, help people understand where they're at and really give them and encourage them to understand that change can happen. You can have a better financial future if you just do some of these really basic things, start applying these things, making it simple.
What would you say are, so you've been doing this for a while, so you've probably ran into common threads that you find that people struggle with when it comes to managing their money?
So really, I think it starts with the lack of understanding of how the financial industry works. So we are under the assumption that some of these financial institutions exist for way more than they actually exist for. So for example, I'll find that people, you know, they're kind of stuck within that bank bubble when maybe they shouldn't be, right? And they're kind of wasting their money sitting and letting it park in one place. For example, we'll have people that have all of their debt with the bank, all of their everything with the bank. And they don't realize that there's other resources that exist that can help them actually manage through the entire financial industry a lot better. So those common threads and fears, people don't like the risk discussion, but it's not even to do with just saving and investing. It's to do with, well, what if I get sick and now my money stops? Well, what if I were to pass away, right? So even those risk conversations, that's a very common thread. And I can't blame people, because I think this industry was built so focused on selling a product rather than advocating for that client and teaching them how they can do better and teaching them how to make smarter decisions when it comes to maneuvering through this industry. I think that brings a lot of fear. People are afraid to have certain discussions or touch certain points. Debt is one, right? Of course, because that's associated with the most guilt. I have debt. I'm a bad human being. That's not what that means. You know, you can have healthy debt, unhealthy debt. You can make decisions tomorrow that are different than you made yesterday. But just being in a safe space to be able to know that you can openly talk about that, because the person on the other end, they've got your back. Like, we want to advocate. We want to give you some strategies and solutions. We're just trying to kind of get people from that, I don't know where to begin, I'm kind of like that ostrich with my head in the sand, to, okay, I got to do better. How are we going to do that? But yeah, debt, insurance, those are big points. Yeah.
I guess a lot of times you don't really stop and think about, you know, if you're buying particular products from a bank or from a lot of these organizations, they've got their best interest in mind, not necessarily yours.
Yeah. And people know that. And I think we all know that subconsciously. And I think that even in its own way prevents people from reaching out, because the automatic assumption is that, oh, you're just going to be just like the bank, or you're going to give me recommendations because you're biased and you need to sell things, right? And number one, our organization doesn't even work that way. We're not product centric. We're not quota based, but just letting people know, no, I'm really here just to be able to observe, to see, so I can show you where you can go to do better, right? And getting people through from that mindset where they start to now look at what's open to you. Look at all these options and possibilities that you have now that you're willing to learn a little bit more about how this industry works. So it's, kind of getting rid of those fears and those stigmas, right? Because there's so many. So many.
So you said our organization doesn't work that way in terms of pointing to specific products. So how does your organization work?
Good question. So everything that we do centers around advocacy for the family. Okay. So none of the companies that we work with, any contracts that we hold to be able to send people off and give them, resources or transactional help for whatever it may be, whether it's debt related or savings related or insurance related, none of them hold us to a quota. So, and we would never work with companies that do. And that's very important. So any of the consultants and advisors that are licensed with us, work with us, they go out there and they're kind of the front face of the organization that we represent and the companies that we represent. They will not get fired if they don't sell that person insurance, right? So right there, it's just, hey, we have time to work with you, right? We're not trying to force you to do anything, but we're trying to get a better understanding so we can give you better direction. Because everybody needs direction. You can't figure things out on your own all the time, right? So just to give people that ease of mind, that's how we're different. So there's no quota-based sales. We really like to take time with that client to be able to identify where their financial house, I guess, is weak, or it could be broken, right? So that now we can identify how to fix those areas. And we always focus on a greater goal. Right. So like, even if a family comes to us because they're trying to buy a house, we're going to identify the problems within that entire situation. We're going to, even if that person can't buy a house anytime soon because it's not feasible, right? It's too out of their price range, but we can help you tackle that better. But we can create some cash flow in your home because you're saving money on other things, but we can help you save and invest. Right. So although maybe that home ownership dream isn't right now, right away, we can do this. We'll help you along the way, but we won't leave you, right? We're not going to say, oh, you can't do this, and then go bye-bye. So you have that support, which is also very unique and very different, right? We stick with our clients. And I've never had to turn a client away or a family away because I couldn't give them advice because it wasn't within my realm, right? So I find that that's really special. We don't turn people away.
At what age should parents start talking to their kids about these things? I mean, in school, nobody taught me in school or anybody I know of in school about balancing a checkbook or anything like that. Well, they don't even have checkbooks anymore, but to balance my bank account. But as parents, at what age should this conversation start?
You know what? Very early on. And I know that can be very, I guess, intimidating for parents, especially, let's say we've had a rough couple of years or whatever your lives look like. If you didn't have a very positive, experience within your own family unit when you were a child talking about money and finance, it can be very intimidating because maybe you don't feel that you are where you should be financially at this moment. And you feel almost insecure about sharing information with your child, or you don't feel adequate to be able to give them good direction. But you really should, at a very young age, start teaching your children and putting them in spaces where they can learn along with you. So a lot of the families that we work with, especially when they become a lot more confident, financially confident is what I call them in their scenario and what they're doing, bring your kids to our workshops. Right? There's so many different workshop tools and resources that we can give people to where they can help their kid understand a budget. When you go to the store, you can have, a 5, 6, 7-year-old child that knows how to count tell you why one deal is better than the next. Even when you're buying vegetables, well, why should I buy this one and not this one? Just having these little discussions that make them conscious about what it is to manage money, and then not being afraid to talk to your children as they're growing up about maybe setbacks that you have or that you're facing and what you're trying to do. It's almost like, in a strange way, we're keeping ourselves accountable to our children, which, in my opinion, it helps us drive ourselves forward when we're open with our children, because now we can set goals together, right? Well, you want to go on vacation, you want to go to Disney, for example, that classic kind of children's dream. Well, how are you going to make that happen? How can we make that happen together? And having these discussions, letting kids kind of dream and envision things with us. And that helps us as parents also stay accountable to how we manage our money. It all comes full circle, because now if you've promised your kids something, right? Yeah. It's the hardest type of accountability, because your kids are going to come and remind you. Remember, mom, remember dad, and whatever that goal could be. It could be a goal where, you're coming from a space where you're renting, or you've had to maybe move several times because of the rental market, right? And your children are kind of involved in this, right? They have to move with you. They have to sever ties with you when you're moving, because maybe you live for a landlord that's selling the house and now you have to find a different space to move to. It's just maybe setting those goals with your kids. Hey, down the road, I'd love for us to have a house. Your kids will remind you. Right. And then they can also use you as a positive example, knowing that you're working towards something positive, and they get to notice your work ethic. Right. So it's amazing how those small money conversations can really change an entire environment at home, because we're open to having those conversations. Right.
What would you say is the biggest challenges that you see? Is it fear around money, or just mismanaging the money that people have? You know what I mean? Some people grow up with a certain fear and anxiety around it. And so, like you said, stick your head in the sand sort of thing. And then there's other people who, they're buying Uber Eats every minute, and they're not realizing, $5 here, $10 there, 25. And then they look at their bank account and they're like, oh my God, where did the money go?
Yeah, we live in a very demanding space and a demanding society, right? So it's so easy to tap your card, and it's so easy to order Uber Eats. But I find that a lot of people just need that encouragement, because in some level, I think everybody's finances are fear driven. I think that's a given. If you don't have much and now you're faced with a place, like, I'll tell you, very recently I sat down with a gentleman, and his income doubled because he got into trades. Okay. But now more than ever, he's fearful about saving and investing, because he's never had this much money to his disposal, and he doesn't want to lose it. Right. So it's interesting how fear, no matter how well, financially we're doing from like a career spectrum or a income spectrum, if we lack the knowledge to what we need to do with that and how to set ourselves up foundationally to have a strong, and I always say financial home, because that really includes a lot of pieces, right? But you got to know what that is. And you have to put those pieces and those blocks of that house together so that no matter what happens, you're not going to be at a severe loss, or if there's a setback. And I think a lot of people, that's what's lacking. I just don't know where to start. There's so many mediums that are telling me to do something.
Yeah.
Uber Eats tells me that it's convenient for me to get home food for, delivered. But then you look at what that's doing to your overall financial health, and you're not equating it to, look how much quicker I could retire and stop working down the road if I stopped doing this and I just reallocated my money somewhere else. Right. So it's building that, because you're learning. Number one, you're sitting down in front of a professional that is not biased. They literally want to help you do better, and they're really trying to help you and just teach you some things. And then having their backup, and now being able to understand what that proper financial home looks for you, and what that can do for you in the future, even when there is uncertainty that comes. Just helping people understand that they can be stronger financially, that kind of tends to get rid of those fears, because now you're not as afraid to move, right? But yeah.
We're in a scenario now wherein we're becoming less and less cash based. And so we're becoming more and more, back in the day, you took $100 out of the bank. I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but there was this point in time you had to go to the bank teller in order to get money. And if you needed money, you had to go and get it within a certain time. Otherwise, they're closed until the next day.
That's right.
And then the automated tellers came, so you could go and get money 24 hours a day, but everything was cash based, so you still had to have cash. And so we've become more and more removed from the physicalness of cash, and now we're becoming more and more removed from actually going into a store to get something and pay with cash. Now the convenience of having everything delivered is really, really easy. So this migration from, I had $100 cash in my hand and I could physically see it as I was spending it.
Yes.
Versus now, I don't really even see it. How does has that impacted the way that people understand spending? Do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like the more that money's become virtual is the less disciplined we are becoming with money, especially when we're trying to keep a budget or we're trying to create a little bit of extra money to be able to do something. It's so easy just to kind of have those holes, pouring out of, my dad said, I don't want holes in my pockets, and what he used to mean is I don't want my money just to go anywhere, and I don't even know where it's going. But today it's so much easier to not really be conscious of where your money is going and having that basic discipline. So again, I feel the way that people can help kind of wedge that a little bit and still be more conscious is even after the fact, right? Looking at your bank statements. Most people don't look at their bank statements. They don't review them. Money could be coming out for something out of your debit account for months, and you don't even realize that apparently you subscribed to something that took like $300 out of your pocket in the last couple of months, because we're so not aware, right? But now we have to be even more aware, right? We have to look at those things. We have to highlight where our money's going. How much did I spend on food? Oh, dang, that's and what is the standard for spending on food, right? Because we base things on our own standard. But what is a family like? One of the most common questions that I get from families is when we're talking, let's say, about husband, wife, and children, or partners and children, I'll ask them, what do you think you spend in groceries week to week? Let's look at that. And then they'll say to me, after they've given me a number, they'll say, but what's the standard? What does a family spend in food nowadays, right? So
that's a good question. Is there a standard?
Well, you know what? Don't ask me about today's number, because with all of this inflation, it is changing. But for example, when I started in this industry, the standard was about $50 to $75 per person in the household on groceries per week. That was the standard. So if you had a family of 5 in a household, you said 5 times 5 or 5 times 75, depending on obviously what you wanted to budget. And that was a standard. So still today, I have sort of a standard. So if I'm sitting with a family and, we're looking at where there's money is going, and we're not there to make them feel bad about it. We really want to know, because maybe we can point something out that can help them. Right. And we're finding that a family of 3 or 4 is spending $1,200 a month on food. We know that that's way too much, right? Still, even by today's standard. And that's usually not just groceries. That's, again, eating out, right? And that's a lot of money. When you think what even cutting that down a little bit, could do for your family in the next couple of years, if you kept that money and you did something else with it, that's a big deal. It can really change lives and help you build an emergency fund, in case the next shutdown happens and now you don't know where you're going to get your income, right? So it's interesting how that works, though, because there's really we're not taught a guideline. We're not taught what's normal and what isn't, right?
I think you're just trying to take away my Timmy's cash money. That's what it is.
Yeah. You know what? If you want to go and have your Timmy's, you go have your Timmy's, but be aware of how much money is going to it, because nobody, we work so hard. Nobody should sit there and tell us, hey, you're not allowed to spend money on this anymore. Come on, we're adults and we work really hard. We should have some aspect of allowance where we can go and spend it on whatever we choose. But the problem is, again, there's no limit that we set to that a lot of times, right? So, and when you start watching where your money's going, you kind of go, okay, man, if I could have done this the last year, look how much I would have had left, right? So just being more conscious, really.
I think that's one of the, there's also a, there's a certain level of, guilt that when it comes to, I'm going to treat myself to something. Somebody may have been saving their money well or whatever, right? But then being able to take a certain amount of money, and this is for me to do something for me. And I would, I haven't taken your seminars, but I would assume that there's a certain portion of it where you kind of say, you know what, you need to budget somewhere in there something for you.
Absolutely.
Right. And but yet there's always, for some people, there's a certain level of anxiety when I'm doing this for me.
Yeah, I think we all deserve to have something that we can say, this is for me, especially when you're a parent and you have children. It's funny to see people's budgets, by the way, when as soon as they have kids, like their clothing budget is like nothing and all their children get like everything. And this just becomes this norm in a household where you don't even think about what you're wearing, but all of a sudden your children gets the best clothing, right? Yeah. But you still have to maintain that this is for me. And I think mentally, that's just a healthy thing, because you have to, you can't just cut off your own budget at the end of the day. You're not going to feel satisfied. And you know what happens too is when people don't set a budget, ultimately that money is still leaving somewhere else. Yeah. It's going somewhere else, right? And maybe you're not even acknowledging where it's going, but we have people that say, oh no, I don't spend any money on myself. And then we look at their budgets and they're spending like $200-300 a month on Amazon orders because it's convenient, right? Yeah. So, okay. So if that's what you do, then set a budget and just what you're not going to go over every month, rather than saying, well, I don't feel like I spend money, because we're just not conscious. We actually are. You go outside and you pick up that extra coffee, or you grab that extra, shirt off the rack if you're at the mall or something, grabbing something for your kids, right? But we don't factor that in as that was a treat for me. It's just this mundane thing, right? So again, coming back to that, just consciousness, right? Be aware and be honest, right? I think a lot of times we feel guilty when we're trying to hide something. So even when you're trying to, create a plan with your partner or get on the same page with your partner, just again, knowing, hey, we're going to be honest about this, right?
There's a lot of couples who have no idea as to what their partner's financial situation looks like.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they have their own separate bank accounts, they have their own separate everything, and they might cover certain bills individually. But I've talked to a lot of people who everything is so completely separate. They have no idea what's going on the other side of the fence. And then sometimes when they find out, they're in complete shock.
Yes.
Good shock and bad shock.
Yeah, so usually that essence of hiding things, it's coming from something else. It's coming from somewhere else, right? Because why would you want to hide things from your partner? So I know it's a part of something bigger than, right? And I'll be, just from my experience in the last 10 years working in this industry, I got to be very honest with you. You know, when people come to us, and this is not obviously to be able to pinpoint every single household would behave like this, or there's a risk to this. But so, you know, if couples are listening to this show, don't freak out. You can, you know, get on the same page, but don't freak out about this statement. But I've seen so many times where, number one, one of the partners is not wanting to be involved with the process, and the other person is already frustrated.
Yeah. And
they're saying, well, if they're not going to do it with me, I'm doing this without them.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what they're doing with their money. I don't know what's going on. And I'll tell you, most of those couples are not together anymore today. And that's just, it's a sore fact, right? Because they can't even tell me, they don't even know how much that person makes in salary or per hour. And it's got to be frustrating to at least one of those parties because, right, we bring our own dynamic to a relationship. Yeah. Right. So even that one person could be so frustrated, and it's not to say it's men or women. I think there's a good mix of this, but like women, they're very insecure very quickly. Right. So if their husband doesn't want to take part in something that could help the family grow, right, that's gonna be a very interesting place for that woman's psyche. Where is it going? She's not feeling secure, and you don't want to help with that security. It takes. So, and again, you know, half of the marriages break up because of financial, you know, disputes. So it doesn't help when that other person doesn't want to be a part of that conversation. Like, we shouldn't be hiding anything from our partners if we're looking to grow together. You can keep it, and I'll tell you, you can keep your finances separate. I see some couples, man, they work so amazing together. They have their own accounts and they're doing their own thing, but they come back to the drawing table. And people have an awareness of what's happening, although they could be managing things on their own. And that's fine, but it's just the secretive aspect, right? And that can come from many places. Maybe people have seen that happen in their households growing up, right? And that's often the case, right? But we got to break through those barriers because it's not worth it, right? We got to get over those guilts and those feelings and grow.
Yeah. If you're just joining me right now, this is Patrick O'Morris and the Patrick Morris Show here on iLive Radio. If you are listening to us through the website or the app, by all means, if you jump on YouTube, if you have any questions, you can ask us there, and we can try to answer them. Okay, so you again, if people want to join your workshops, your free workshops, they can do this by going where?
They can look me up on Facebook. That's the easiest way, Karolina Zamianska. Or they can look for Trinity Solutions Team. We're on all social media platforms. So we're on everything from LinkedIn to Facebook to Instagram. Just send us a message. Let us know you want to come to a webinar, and we'll get you registered for the date that you're available. We have them 3 nights a week. Okay, so we're very open with this. And this is basically where we kind of cover who we are, what we do, how we help people strategize, what are some of the resources and areas where we can help them. And there's absolutely no obligation. We don't charge for them. We don't want anything returned. We really want people to come and see what is possible for them.
So one of the questions I guess people listening might be asking, they're saying, okay, so you're doing these free workshops to give this information, you know, what's in it for you?
Yes, good question. So in financial services, any type of individual that basically is either brokered or licensed with the government and works with companies, okay? Everything in finance is transactional at the end of the day, right? So if I sit down with a family and now that family needs certain advice or needs to be referred out to another professional or to a company that can help them fulfill whatever we're trying to do for them, there is always a middle ground. So when I send that client to them, that company will always compensate. Okay, so that's typically how things work. And this is why at the end of the day, our marker is not, how production for us. It's more, how many families can we help every month? Because we know ultimately people are going to be continuing to go through a process with us. We don't leave families, family dynamics change. People come back to us for help all the time. And any, part where we have a strategy with them and now it's the next part they can fulfill or they can go and they can get help on, we know ultimately there's going to be some form of compensation. Because I have a very, very tall 15-year-old and he likes to eat, right? So rightfully so, it has to be an even situation, right? Sometimes people come to us and they get upset, right? They're like, well, then it's not really free. Well, I mean, nothing's really free, but we want to give you some guidance and here's where you can go. This is your next step. So for example, like debt. We work with organizations that can help people with debt consolidation, helping protect credit, right? So we're not going to send them off to a company that, might really affect their credit negatively. We're trying to conserve that for a family. And we have so many partnerships. So we'll send them somewhere that fits their need rather than we have this one size fit all mentality, right? So it has to fit that family's need at whatever stage we are building that financial house for that family. Okay.
There's a certain, if I go to get insurance to a broker and this broker works with, 6 or 7 insurance companies, then oftentimes that broker will not necessarily put me with the cheapest insurance on their portfolio, but they might put me through to the insurance company that's going to pay them the most.
Exactly.
Right? So there's a certain fear or anxiety that people have around situations like that. Is that something that you encounter?
Absolutely. I think a lot of fear surrounding insurance has absolutely to do with just this lack of trust. And it's usually stemming from something, right? I have so many people that come to us and they just say, hey, well, insurance is a scam. And here's why. And they have a story to back it up.
It's all a scam. Come on.
But you know what? I'll tell you something. The wealthiest individuals that understand how to walk through the financial industry and maneuver through it, because think about money is kind of like a current, right? It's currency. It needs to move, right? So your money has to move in order for it to be able to do something and grow and help you build wealth. So number one, most people will park their money and they don't realize what they're doing wrong. And some people, even when they're giving money to companies, like insurance companies, they don't really know how it actually affects their entire financial situation, right? Because maybe they sat down with a person in the past that sold them insurance, but didn't give them a plan behind that insurance. There's no strategy there, right? Yeah. So again, going back to strategy, when people learn what is out there, how to structure themselves properly and not properly, what companies to go to, when it becomes more educational, then that's less fearful now, and you can be a lot more trusting of that process, right? So for us, people come to us and we'll never say to a person, hey, do you need life insurance? It's not going to happen, because that's not the conversation. The conversation is, what is your goal and what is your biggest financial concern right now? Those are literally the 2 questions that we ask people. What do you want to do in the next little bit? What is your biggest financial concern? And for most people, it's not, I don't have life insurance. That's just not a part of that conversation, right? So we don't start there. But a part of a properly structured financial home is to learn how to assess your risk. And risk is, if I can't work tomorrow, what are my kids eating? If I'm off of work, for example, people aren't even aware of some of the statistics. There's a statistic that actually was done by, I don't even exactly know. You can probably look it up online. I don't know the name of the organization, but they ran a statistic on the average amount of time that a Canadian in Canada is disabled if they have a disability. I was floored. This was something that I researched recently. It's 3 years.
Wow.
Right. So if a person falls ill or becomes disabled because of an injury, there is a very high likelihood they might not be able to work and get back to their full income for 3 years. So how, in those case scenarios, it's not even about us saying, well, I'll never get sick or I'll never get injured. I think we're all wiser than that. But what do we do to plug the holes to make sure that our family is protected? And I think that's a very real It's a very real topic and discussion that most people don't have, because we're too focused on somebody's going to sell me something that's wrong, rather than like what is your human capital value? I talk on this a lot. Like, what is a person's human capital value if you couldn't work between now and your retirement? What are you losing? What is your family losing? What potential? So now, based on that information, now you know how to assess your risk. We're able to give you strategies, right? Which is really, really important, and teach you more.
We've got about 10 minutes left. Time
wow.
flies.
Time flies.
See, time flies. You touched on this a little bit, but in the next few minutes, maybe you could sort of just walk me through what an average session with your organization would look like. So I come to you and I'm like, okay, help me.
Okay, beautiful. So when people come to us, there's usually a topic of concern, right? Mm-hmm. There's something that triggered you to come to us, maybe even triggered you to come to this webinar. Whatever that is, that's the first thing that we want to be able to assess. Mm-hmm. What is that? Then what we do is we literally do like a complete financial assessment. So we look at the workings of your money. What's coming in, what's coming out, where is it going? How are we managing? What debt do you have? What risk management do you have in place? So we do a full assessment. And sometimes we need, some supportive information to kind of know exactly how things break down. Like somebody can tell me that they make, $30 an hour, but we don't actually understand fully what comes home or what kind of tax strategies they can use for that income, because we don't really understand where some of their taxes go and maybe benefits and all that stuff. So we are very thorough with that assessment, because as far as I'm concerned, money doesn't really, numbers don't really lie. So if I know exactly what's happening in a scenario, now I can really assess what's lacking, and then we can give you a step-by-step strategy. So it's a pretty simple process, right? A lot of people, they connect with us through webinars. I get a lot of people who just directly reach out to me and they want to sit down and they want to chat, right? There's no charge for any of this, right? So we'll sit down, we'll help you do that full assessment, because our goal is to help you maneuver through the financial industry smoothly. So we're not just asking you how much money you make, but we're also asking, okay, how's your budget looking? How are you managing your mortgage? Is there a way that you can manage that better? Is there a way that you can pay off your mortgage faster, right? Mm-hmm. So we're opening that conversation and we're getting that assessment. And then at the end, the follow-up is we sit down and we have some sort of aspect of strategy in mind. Sometimes we sit down with a client once or twice to really be able to walk that out and show them what they could be doing a little bit better, and we handhold them. So it's purely, we will never send off, let's say, even when somebody comes to us and they're saying, hey, do you have a connection for a mortgage? Well, I do, but I want to understand what you need, right? Let me understand that, and then I can help you get connected to the right professional, right? So there's always that in between, and that assessment is that in between. And then the strategy is what comes next. And it's a continuous thing, right? Because most people, we can't show them how they can get into a home in 30 seconds or in a month. It's a continuous thing. So we continue to meet and we continue to work with that client.
So in essence, you're helping them to build out their roadmap, their financial roadmap.
Absolutely.
And
yep.
And I guess you're checking in on them from time to time to hold them accountable.
Yes, absolutely. So and it's really easy to see where accountability is necessary. And it's really cool to see too that a lot of these clients and these families, they keep coming back to us to give us updates. Mm-hmm. And I love that, to get that text message, or because people are connected with us personally, so they could call me and tell me that something happened and they're really excited about it. And we help plug that into their strategy and update it. So it is a work in progress. It is really a journey that we're taking with that family or individual to help them see a better future and see that through. Okay.
That's quite the pivot from working with animals.
Yes, very much so. And what was funny, before I even got into this profession, I was thinking like, maybe I'm going to get into banking. I don't know. What could I do? But I really loved that aspect of education. Even in my practice life, I usually managed the practice and I helped the team and I educated people with sort of the daily runnings of these organizations that I worked for. So this wasn't that far-fetched, mm-hmm. because really it was just, again, kind of problem solving from a very different pinpoint, right? But still problem solving in the end.
One thing that a lot of people don't pay attention to or even think about or it's on the forefront of their mind, is their emotional spending.
Yes.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah, we only have like 4 minutes.
I know. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, I don't know. That's a big one to unbundle. But honestly, a lot of emotional spending, in my opinion, comes from something that's trauma related as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When traumatic things happen in our lives, we go to certain things. And a lot of people go to emotional spending. It's almost like to try to forget what's happening in life. I'm just going to cover myself and I'm going to blanket myself and I'm going to get myself stuff because it makes me feel better. Mm-hmm. But we all know that anytime you're doing something emotionally and not logically, the essence of that it doesn't last, right? You might feel good for a day and then you're finding yourself not being able to sleep at night and you're like, what did I do? Like, where did I spend this money? I did it again, right? So I do believe it has something to do with trauma, right? Mm-hmm. And when we find ourselves in tough financial situations, if we are pivoting to that I'm going to go buy myself something, it's not a healthy place to be. And that's not something I can unbundle. Mm-hmm. I'm not that type of professional, but yeah, we got to be open about having these conversations because many people struggle with this. It's a very common thing, very common thing.
Well, how important is it to know your credit score?
Very important. And it's credit scores, they're free to check in most places. You can find places where you can check them. You can go to Equifax or TransUnion and actually have like a membership where you can check your credit score and your credit history. But very, very important because it helps you build awareness of what's happening with your score. If somebody is doing something behind your back that's maybe messing with your score. And credit scores are what really are a part of us being able to say, hey, we're worthy to leverage. So that means if we're looking to buy a house down the road, your credit score can't wait, right? That's something that you have to be aware and build up over time. Because if you get stuck in a pre-approval, let's say, or trying to get any type of loan, and all of a sudden now you're being told that something's on your credit history that you're not aware of, you never want to be stuck in that scenario, especially in how busy the market is today. And you never want to be in a position in your life where you can't leverage, right? You can't walk into the bank when you want to and be like, hey, I want this loan because I have something good that I want to do with it to help me build wealth. So if we look at it from that perspective, it's really important to keep your eye on that. And we help people kind of determine what they can do with it. And we even help people understand what it takes to build it back up and recover. So yeah, it's a very important conversation for sure.
And what age should someone start planning for their retirement?
Right away, from the beginning. Like, I don't think there's and because if you think the longer timeline you have to save,